Assalamu alaikum everyone, hope you're doing well. As the last minute tips, I'm going to tell you some important things that you should follow, try to follow to do your exam well. And I wish all of you really best of luck because you have worked hard throughout this session, and during these last days, I can also I also witnessed the kind of commitments and hard work you have been doing. So I wish all of you best of luck, and I believe all of you will crack it, inshallah. So as the last minute tips, I'm basically going to tell you some important things that you should follow. Number one is try to do section B or section C first, because section B and section C are quite straightforward because their questions are easily understandable and they are 20 mark essays. And while attempting section B and C, you must consider 3 assessment objectives, right? So you can write assessment objectives on the question paper assessment. When you read the question, let's say you are going to solve question number 2, and on question number 2 you can first of all you can write assessment objective 1 AO1 AO2 AO3, so that you don't forget to accomplish all of these assessment objectives. For assessment objective 1, you can identify the basic terms given in the question, then explain them thoroughly. And assessment objective 2, you have to connect all those terms, how they are connected to each other. You can make graph as well. For essay questions, keep in mind you have to make at least one graph, right? There is none of the topic that has no graph, like except standard of living. Sometimes standard of living you can make graphs, but if you don't, sometimes that is acceptable. But in most of the cases, like 99% cases, you have to make at least one graph for an essay, right? You can make more than one as well, but at least there should be one graph. If you don't make any graph, or you make graph that is not properly labeled or properly elaborated, then keep in mind you cannot get more than 50% marks. Even like out of 20 maximum, generally we see that students get 8 to 9 marks. That is like level 2 marking. And for that you must make graph if you want to get full marks or maximum possible marks. So in analysis, what we do is we connect variables that we have already explained in assessment objective 1, and when we connect them, we build relationships. Relationships mean कि if one thing increases, what will happen to the other thing, and what will happen to the third thing. For example, I'm giving an example here. For example, examiner says that there is economic growth occurring in the country. How will it affect inflation and employment in the country? Inflation and employment, right? So in analysis part, first of all, in assessment objective 1, you will explain thoroughly what economic growth is, what inflation is, what employment is. And in assessment objective 2, you will connect these 3 variables. For example, if growth increases, what will happen to the inflation? Generally inflation increases. You will say that on average inflation increases when there is economic growth, because aggregate demand increases and demand pull inflation is caused. And then you will have to tell that when economic growth increases, employment opportunities increase, more investments take place in the country, so as a result unemployment will fall and employment will increase. How they will increase? You will have to make aggregate demand, aggregate supply diagram and elaborate that, analyze that all the situation thoroughly. And similarly, now you have to analyze that when you evaluate that, so when you are evaluating then you have to talk against whatever you have said in analysis part. In analysis part, you said that increase in economic growth will increase inflation and increase employment. Now you have to talk against that, right? You may say I was just joking in assessment objective 1, objective 2, that increase in growth increases inflation and employment, because that has limitations, right? You should not use the word I was joking, but just I'm just as a joke. I'm not good at joking. So keep in mind, you have to like talk against whatever you have said in assessment objective 2. So increase in economic growth, now you will say increase in economic growth will decrease inflation and decrease employment. If up conditions, you will have to put the conditions now. What will you say? You will say that if economic growth is achieved through supply side policies, then inflation will decrease, right? Inflation will decrease. And if supply side policy, it is achieved through supply side policy, and government is giving more subsidy to the employers so that they use better machinery, technology and tools, then they will move to the technology, and as a result workers will be made unemployed, right? So employment will fall or unemployment will rise. For supply side policy, for analysis part, I told you that you have to make aggregate demand, aggregate supply diagram. Let me show you for analysis what graph you can make for this specific statement. Believe me, in economics is interesting and you can keep connecting things with one another, right? So we have like real GDP on X. If you can connect things given in the question, then it's really a simple subject, right? So we have real GDP on X and this is aggregate demand. I'm making graph for like analysis part. This is aggregate supply, so focus on my voice more instead of writing. So initially price level is P, equilibrium is E and real GDP is Y. So economic growth that is achieved through the higher aggregate demand or demand side policies, then equilibrium will move to E1, where real GDP will rise to Y1 and price level will increase to P1. So you can see that increase in economic growth has led to increase in inflation, and when aggregate demand increases, investments will be increasing, so jobs are created and employment will also increase. So you will make this graph for analysis part. Now moving to the evaluation part. In evaluation part, you have to say that if economic growth is achieved through supply side policy instead of demand side policy, then inflation will fall and unemployment may also rise or employment may fall as well. So we can make the graph for supply side policy. So we again label real GDP on X. Keep in mind, we label real GDP on X and we label price level. Instead of price, we label price level on y-axis. So this is like aggregate demand and this is aggregate supply. Equilibrium takes place at E, where equilibrium price level is P and real GDP is Y. So now increase in aggregate supply will cause economic growth. So aggregate supply will increase from E to E1, where real GDP will rise from Y to Y1 and price level will decrease from P to P1. So now inflation is decreasing, economic growth is occurring, and employment may or may not rise. Both things may occur. For example, if employment aggregate supply increases, now more workers may be needed to produce greater quantity of goods and services, or there may be like greater use of machinery, technology and tools, because in supply side policy government provides subsidy to the firms so that they can purchase new machinery, technology and tools and increase investment. So if they move or shift to the new technology or capital intensive techniques of production, then unemployment will also rise or employment will fall. So this is how you can analyze the evaluate the situation. Another important graph that you can make here for evaluation is if economy is already at the position where aggregate supply is horizontal straight line like this, then increase in aggregate demand will not cause inflation or economic growth will not cause inflation. So this is long run aggregate supply as per the Keynesian school of thought. So we have price level on y-axis and we have real GDP on x-axis. Real GDP, focus more on my voice instead of like writing. So aggregate demand is AD, so equilibrium takes place at E, where price level is P and real GDP is Y. So now increase in aggregate demand will shift aggregate demand curve to the right from AD to AD1. equilibrium will move from E to E1, where real GDP will rise from Y to Y1. When GDP increases, economic growth occurs. When aggregate demand increases, employment will increase. But you can see that price level is exactly the same on both equilibrium. So inflation is not caused by this like economic growth. And then at the end you have to conclude whatever you have evaluated. You have to conclude at the end, right? So conclusion is compulsory. So this is how you can complete all the assessment objectives, and I believe you got this. If you did that, then thumb up and subscribe to this channel as well. And the second thing is, okay, once you are done with section A and B, then move to the section A. In section A, what generally students do is, I'm suggesting to do section A at the end, because you have to read some text and extract given in the question. That takes a lot of time sometimes. Yeah, also keep in mind you should not spend more than 40 minutes on each section. You can spend less than that, so that you get some like 5-6 minutes at the end, so that you can go through your answers once again. But don't spend more than 40 minutes on any of the sections. So spend 40 minutes on section A, B, section C, and then on section A. At the end, do section A, that is data response or case study. And for that, you need not to read thoroughly everything that is written in the case study, right? In business studies, generally students have to read that carefully. But in economics, the beauty of economics is the context. The extract is very huge sometimes, and you need not to read everything written there. You have to focus on the given tables, right? The tables that are given in the question and the graphs that are being made in the data. You should thoroughly look into these two things first, and then without reading any other material of section A, go to the questions. And you will find that there are many questions that even don't need to like read the data. Okay, so how to solve like section A? Section A causes a lot of trouble for the students, but keep in mind the tip I'm going to tell you will bring wonders for you, inshallah ta'ala. First of all, one question is generally about the given table and diagram. The first question is like it says, okay, compare or identify or like this, like state the relationships. So keep in mind you have to like first of all give an overall review what you think is happening there, and then relate it to the graph. For example, if there are two like unemployment and inflation are given on this graph, for example, right? So he says that compare the relationship between inflation and unemployment from period 1 T1 time 1 to time 2 and time 2 to time 3, right? Time 2 to time 3. So you will now say that from time 1 to time 2 there is a positive relationship because graph is going upward, so inflation and unemployment both are increasing, so this is positive relationship. And from period 2 to 3 graph is going down again, so it is a negative relationship. So this is how you can compare. Similarly, examiner sometimes gives values, some figures, and then you can easily compare them. While you are comparing the figures or values or graphs, keep in mind you should write 1 point like maybe positive and 1 point against that. Sometimes both points may be positive. For example, if he is asking about balance of payment, compare the balance of payment of let's say Nigeria from 2002 to 2003, then you may say that if both values are negative, for example in first year negative value was -2 and then it is -3, so you will say that Nigeria is facing deficit in both years and deficit has increased from 2002 to 2003 because negative figure is increasing. Okay, so again the other question is generally explain question. For explain question it asks for 4 marks generally, and for 4 marks you have to give 2 points of knowledge given in the question, and then 2 points are for the reference to the context given extract. For example, if examiner says that explain whether the market structure in this extract is imperfect market structure, so then what you have to do is you have to first of all explain two features of imperfect competition. Let's say you may say that there is price discrimination in imperfect market structure, and you may say that product are differentiated in imperfect market structure. So you have to identify two like basic features of imperfect competition, and then you can go to the extract and look at the extract, the text that is given in the question, section A. Then you can pick the values or things or examples that are given there that are evident that the market structure is an imperfect market. If it is not, then again you can say that like data does not provide the information that the market structure is an imperfect market structure, rather it seems to be more perfectly competitive, या monopoly. And monopoly is also an imperfect market structure. Perfect competition is only perfect competition, all other markets are imperfect competition, right? So if in the data suggests that there is price discrimination and there is differentiated products are produced there, then definitely it will be an imperfect market structure. And the last part of this question is discuss question, and discuss question is generally a generic question instead of referring to the given context. Sometimes he asks to refer to the given extract as well, but in most of the cases it is generic. If it is generic, still you can relate it to the data as well. For that, like assess question, last question is assess question, and for assess question again you have to give assessment objective 1, 2, 3, all three. You can explain 2 points in favor, 1 or 2 points against, and then give a conclusion. So this is how you should go with, and definitely start with. And again when you go to the exam center, stay calm, don't be hurry, read the questions carefully twice or thrice. Like you should not you should not be in hurry, and you should not start writing immediately when you see the question. Rather read the question carefully, first of all extract whatever examiner is requiring, then try to answer that question, and I believe you will do it, inshallah. And what other thing I wanted to convey is I just forgot, just a minute. Yeah, another important thing is sometimes students use like soft pencil to draw the diagrams, HB pencils. So I discourage doing that, although you can make neat graphs, because in economics paper you need not to make neat graphs or neat handwriting, so don't focus on those things. If your writing is readable, that is perfectly fine. If your graphs are readable, that are perfectly fine, and if they are connecting or creating the relationships that are asked in the question, then it is perfectly fine. You can make them like freehand graphs, right? So you need not to make straight lines or like perfect lines with ruler, right? Sometimes what students do is they keep making graphs, very neat and clean graphs with HB pencil, and they keep spending their time. A lot of time is wasted there. So keep in mind there are no marks for neat handwriting or neat graphs. Just keep in mind every graph should be labeled properly. For example, on X we have quantity, on Y we have price, right? We have price, so you should write price. This graph should be properly labeled. This point should be labeled. There should be no point on the graph without labeling, right? So this is how you can perfectly label the graph. So I have labeled everything here. There is no point in this graph that is unlabeled. What students do is just they make lines, simple lines, and they leave it. So examiner gives no marks for such type of graphs if they are not properly labeled. Okay, one more thing that is also really important. Sometimes what students do is students start writing question number 2. They started writing, and when they were half done with this answer, then they realized that they are not doing it perfectly. So what they do is they cross it, right? They try to attempt the same question again, right? So if you attempt the same question again, then I suggest don't cross the first one, because examiner will check both of them. If the first one is correct, then he will give you marks for that. Sometimes what happens is you were thinking correctly, accurately first at the first step, and you were writing a good answer, then you realize your answer is not correct, so you thought differently and you started writing differently. But your second thought was not good, that was incorrect, the first thought was good. If you cross the first thought, then he will not mark it, the question number 2. He will not mark the one that has been crossed. He will not mark the one that you have already crossed. He will mark the one that is uncrossed, and he will allocate marks for this question. If it is incorrect, then definitely you will be on loss. If you think you were not correct initially, then don't worry, leave this question as it is, then again give question number 2 and start writing answer. But there is another case as well. For example, you were initially doing question number 2, you were writing, and then you thought you got stuck somewhere and you thought you cannot write more about this, so question number 3 is better for you. Instead of attempting again question number 2, you are choosing now question number 3 and you started writing. For example, you cross question number 2 and you start writing question number 3, right? In this case, when you have attempted 2 different questions but you have crossed the first one, now examiner is bound to check the crossed one as well. For example, if the crossed one can get better marks as compared to this question number 3, then he will give you the marks for this question even if you have crossed them. Keep in mind, if you have crossed one question and you attempted the same question again, then the crossed one is not checked. If you attempted one question and then crossed it and you attempted another question, different question, then even if it was crossed, he will check it and he will award you marks. And if it gets better marks than the question number 3, then he will give you these marks. Okay, so these were the few things that I wanted all of you to suggest you before the exam. So I wish all of you best of luck, and I'll try if there is some time left with me, I'll try to make graphs of microeconomics that I promised, but somehow I was really stuck with my schedule, and it's really tough sometimes to manage time. So I tried my best to help you out to the extent I could, but I could have helped you a little more. So I regret for that. I could not do that. So next time, inshallah, I'll try to allocate some more time for all of you to help you out during the exams. So see you in the next video soon, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.